The banner said, "Happy 70th Frank." But it hung crooked, the left corner sagging where the tape hadn't held. I noticed because I was the one who hung it. I was also the one who arranged the folding chairs, set out the napkins, plugged in the string lights, and wiped down 23 tables at the VFW hall before the first guest arrived. Meredith arrived 40 minutes late in a green dress that 3 people complimented before she'd taken off her coat. I was standing near the drinks table, holding a ginger ale I didn't really want, when Gerald Whitmore lowered himself into the chair beside me. 74 years old, bad hip, both knees on borrowed time. He'd taught history at the same high school where Dad coached football for 26 years. Here, I pulled the chair out further so he wouldn't have to bend as far. He squeezed my hand once he sat down. "You're a good kid, Ellie." I smiled, because it was the only kind thing anyone would say to me that night, though I didn't know that yet. Gerald watched the room for a moment, the clusters of Dad's old colleagues, the cousins who only showed up for free food, Meredith already holding court near the cake table. Then he turned to me and said something I almost didn't hear over the music. "Your dad never talked about achievements, you know, all those years in the teacher's lounge. Never once bragged about a winning season." He paused. "He only ever talked about his girls. Both of you." I nodded the way you nod when you're not really listening because you're busy watching your sister test the microphone. I should have listened. Meredith tapped the mic twice. The room quieted. She had that talent, the kind of presence that made 50 people stop chewing at the same time. She held a champagne flute in one hand, the mic in the other, and she smiled the smile she'd been perfecting since high school, the one that made you feel included right before she made you feel small. "I want to say a few words about the greatest man I know. She started well. She always started well. That was the trick, enough warmth in the opening to make the knife feel like an accident when it came. She talked about Dad teaching her to ride a bike, about the time he drove 4 hours in a snowstorm to watch her debate tournament, about how he never missed a single one of her recitals. Every story featured Meredith. Every memory had her at the center. Dad was a supporting character in the toast for his own birthday. And then she paused. The kind of pause that has teeth and, you know. She looked at me. Not a glance. A look. Deliberate, calibrated. The way she'd been doing it since I was 14 years old. "Let's be honest." She tilted her head toward me, half smile, performing. "She's another man's mistake." The room laughed. Not all 50. Maybe 30. Maybe 35. I could have counted exactly, but my hands were busy staying still. It wasn't cruel laughter, not from most of them. It was the awkward, go-along kind. The kind that follows a joke people don't know how to refuse. Meredith had trained this room for years. She said the outrageous thing, and everyone else decided it was humor because the alternative was too uncomfortable. Dad looked down at his plate. Mom adjusted her napkin. I stood there for 3 seconds. I know it was 3 because I counted the string lights blinking behind Meredith's head. 3 blinks, 3 seconds, 3 decades of this. Then I set down the ginger ale, opened my bag, took out a white envelope, standard letter size, the kind we use for lab reports at the hospital, walked to the head table, placed it in front of my sister. "Open it," I said. My voice came out the way it does when I'm reading results to a patient who already suspects the news. Steady, clinical, final. It's from the lab. Meredith laughed, the reflexive kind, the kind that comes before the brain catches up. She picked up the envelope, tore it open with her thumbnail, and pulled out the single folded page. She read the first line. She read it again. A 3rd time. A 4th. Then she looked up at Mom. Searched her face the way you search for an exit. Mom wouldn't look back. That was the moment I realized my mother had spent 30 years hiding a secret, just not the one everyone assumed. It started when I was 14. Meredith was 17, home from a weekend at a friend's house, still wearing someone else's borrowed confidence. She found me in the kitchen doing homework and sat across the table like she had news. "I heard Mom and Dad fighting last night," she said. Not upset, excited. The way someone looks when they've found a weapon and can't wait to test it. "Mom had an affair, and you might not be Dad's real daughter." She watched my face when she said it, studied it. I think she was hoping for tears. What she got was silence, because at 14 I didn't have the vocabulary for what that sentence did to my chest. I don't know if Meredith actually heard that argument or invented it. What I know is that she never let it go. At 15, Thanksgiving dinner, she said it the first time in front of people. "Should we set a place for Ellie's real dad too?" She said it like a joke, and our aunt laughed, and Mom passed the gravy without looking up, and Dad said, "Meredith, that's enough." But enough is not stop. Enough is a speed bump, not a wall. And Meredith learned the difference. At 17, at 19, at 22, at 25, 14 Thanksgivings, 14 versions of the same line. She rotated the delivery the way a comedian rotates material. "It makes sense that you don't really look like us." I mean, Mom, just tell her already. Everyone knows. I'm not being mean. I'm being honest. Isn't that what families do? Each time, I looked at Mom. Mom looked at the tablecloth, or the window, or the salt shaker, anything that wasn't my face. Each time, I looked at Dad. Dad looked at his plate, changed the subject. "Who wants more pie? Did anyone see the game? Ellie, how's work?" He never said that's not true. He never said your sister is wrong. He only ever said enough, and enough was never enough. So I learned to count instead of cry. I counted the seconds Meredith held eye contact when she delivered the line. I counted the people who laughed, the people who looked away, the people who suddenly needed to refill their drinks. I counted the times Mom redirected and the times Dad went quiet. I kept a ledger in my head, the way I'd later keep specimen logs at the hospital: date, time, incident, result. 14 Thanksgivings. 23 comments I could recall word for word. 11 times someone laughed. 8 times Dad changed the subject. 0 times Mom said that's not true. I counted because counting kept me from screaming. When I was 22, fresh out of nursing school, first real job, first apartment I paid for myself, I drove home and asked Mom directly. We were alone in the kitchen. She was slicing tomatoes. I stood in the doorway and said the words I'd been rehearsing for a 40-minute drive. "Is it true? What Meredith says? Am I not Dad's?" Mom didn't look up from the cutting board. "Ellie, please. Not today." Then when? The knife stopped. She still didn't look up. "Some questions don't need answers. Sweetheart." I left the kitchen understanding one thing clearly. My mother would never answer that question. Not because the truth was too painful. Because the truth would damage someone she was protecting. I just assumed that someone was me. I was wrong. She was protecting Meredith. She was protecting herself. But I wouldn't know that for another 10 years. Through all of it, the jokes, the silence, the non-answers, Dad was the one constant I couldn't quite categorize. He never defended me with words, but he sat next to me at every dinner, even when Meredith tried to rearrange the seating. He called after every night shift to ask if I'd eaten. He texted every morning, "Eyes up, kid." 2 words, coaching language. The same thing he probably said to his players before a game they were going to lose. I loved my father. But there was a crack in it, thin as a hairline fracture on an X-ray, the kind you can function around for years until one day you put weight on it and it splits. The crack was this. He heard Meredith say it, year after year, and he never once told her she was wrong. Not enough. Not that's not funny. Just wrong. One word. He never said it. I would have kept counting forever. I would have kept showing up, kept bringing casseroles, kept sitting in the chair Dad saved for me and pretending the hairline fracture didn't ache. But then, 4 months before Dad's 70th, a patient's blood work crossed my desk, and everything I thought I knew about my family started bleeding on the page. The chart wasn't even supposed to cross my desk. Dad came in for a pre-surgical consult routine. Nothing serious. Just his left knee finally giving out after 26 years of pacing sidelines. The orthopedic team ran standard blood work, and because I process panels in the clinical pathology lab at Street, Mary's Regional, his results landed in my queue on a Wednesday afternoon between a thyroid check and a metabolic panel. I almost didn't look. I process 60 to 80 panels a day. You stop reading names after a while. But the name Brennan, Frank R., caught me the way a familiar voice catches you in a crowd. I paused, looked at the blood type line. O positive. I knew my own blood type the way every lab tech knows theirs. It's the first thing you memorize in school. A positive. Mom was A positive too. Standard Mendelian genetics. An O father and an A mother can produce an A child. No issue. The math worked. But then I thought about Meredith. 6 months earlier, Meredith had posted one of those Instagram stories, the kind with the donation sticker and the soft focus selfie. Just gave blood. AB positive, universal plasma donor. She'd tagged the Red Cross and added a heart emoji. I remembered scrolling past it while eating a granola bar in the break room. AB positive. I set Dad's chart down, pulled up a Punnett square in my head, the kind I could draw in my sleep. Father, O. Mother, A. Possible offspring blood types. A or O. That's it. There is no combination of O and A alleles that produces AB. None. Not opinion, not interpretation, not a gray area, freshman biology, settled science. An O father and an A mother cannot have an AB child. I sat with that for 11 minutes. I know because the timestamp on the next panel I processed was 11 minutes later. 11 minutes of staring at letters on a screen and feeling the floor tilt under my chair. But I'm a lab tech. I don't panic at abnormal results. I flag them, verify the sample, rerun the test, and look for alternative explanations. So I did what I do. I looked for reasons I could be wrong. Maybe Meredith misremembered her blood type. People do that. Maybe the Instagram post was performative and she'd never actually been typed. Maybe she had cis-AB, an extremely rare phenotype where both A and B alleles sit on the same chromosome. Possible. Not probable, but possible. I needed more data. 2 weeks later, Sunday dinner at Mom and Dad's. The usual cast, Mom at the stove performing hospitality, Dad in his recliner pretending the knee didn't hurt, Meredith and her husband Todd arriving late with a bottle of wine that cost more than my scrubs, and Ray Callahan, of course, Dad's best friend since 11th grade. At every Sunday dinner, every 4th of July, every birthday since before I was born, Ray, with his loud laugh and his first-to-buy-around generosity and his auto body shop stories that Dad never seemed to tire of hearing. I'd sat across from Ray Callahan 1,000 times. But that Sunday, for the first time, I looked. Meredith said something funny, or what she thought was funny, and tilted her head to the left while she laughed. The corner of her mouth pulled up on the left side. A single dimple. Ray laughed at the same joke. Tilted his head to the left, corner of the mouth, left side, same dimple, same angle, like someone had photocopied the gesture and pasted it onto 2 different faces 35 years apart. I put my fork down, picked it back up, put it down again. Nobody noticed because nobody ever noticed me at that table. I spent the next week not sleeping well and running scenarios. The blood type could be wrong. The resemblance could be coincidence. Dimples or polygenic shared dimples between unrelated people happen all the time. I listed every reason I could be wrong because I wanted to be wrong. But I am a lab technician. I do not guess. I test. I ordered 3 home DNA collection kits. One for me, a simple cheek swab, done in my bathroom on a Tuesday morning. One for Dad, I asked him to come in for a follow-up panel related to his knee surgery, and while I had him in the chair, I swabbed him. He didn't ask why. Dad never questioned medical professionals. Coaching instinct. Trust the specialist. One for Meredith collected from a water glass she left on the counter after Sunday dinner. I bagged it in a specimen pouch before Mom cleared the table. I sent all 3 to a private lab in Maryland. No names. Case numbers only. 4 weeks. 20 shifts. 112 panels processed for other people's families while I waited for the results that would rewrite mine. I answered Dad's morning texts, sat through Meredith's group chat messages, helped Mom pick tablecloths for the birthday party. 4 weeks of performing normal when nothing was normal anymore. The results arrived on a Tuesday. I opened them in my car, in the hospital parking lot, engines still running, the air conditioner blowing on a face that had forgotten how to feel temperature. I read the first page 3 times, not because I didn't understand the science, Because I understood it completely, and the science was rewriting everything. I read it 3 times sitting in that parking lot with the engine running and my hands 10 and 2 on the steering wheel like I was about to drive somewhere. I wasn't going anywhere. I couldn't feel my feet. The first read was shock. The second was verification. I checked the case numbers, matched them to my log, confirmed which swab was which. Lab tech protocol. Even when your own life is on the page, you verify. The third read was when the math started cascading. I was his. I was always his. Every Thanksgiving, every joke, every time Meredith said another man's mistake while 50 people laughed and Dad looked at his plate, I was his. The joke wasn't just cruel. It was wrong. It was backward. It was a mirror held up to the wrong face for 18 years. And Meredith, the golden child, the valedictorian, the one who organized the birthday party and gave the speeches and sat at the center of every family photo, was the one who wasn't. I turned off the engine. The air conditioner died and the Virginia heat pressed in through the windshield, but I didn't notice because my brain was running results the way it runs panels. Systematic. One finding at a time. Finding one. Mom knew. She had to. There was no version of this where Diane Brennan didn't know who she'd slept with and when. She knew Meredith might not be Frank's, and she never tested, never confirmed, never let the question get close to an answer, because the answer would unravel her. Not just the affair, the 30 years of architecture built on top of it, the church volunteer work, the dinner parties, the marriage that looked solid from the outside because nobody knew the foundation had a crack in it. The same word I'd used for Dad and me. Cracks everywhere in this family. We just plastered over different walls. And the silence. Mom's silence wasn't neglect. It was strategy. Every time Meredith pointed at me and said she's not one of us, the room looked at me. And while they were looking at me, nobody looked at Meredith. Nobody noticed the dimple. Nobody did the blood-type math. Mom let me absorb the suspicion like a sponge so the real secret stayed dry. She didn't fail to protect me. She chose not to. Finding 2. Dad knew too. This one sat in my chest like a stone. I thought about every time he changed the subject. I'd spent years reading that as weakness, a man too conflict-averse to stand up for his daughter. But it wasn't weakness. It was weight. Every time Meredith said, "She's not yours, Dad," Frank Brennan heard those words and knew they described the girl saying them, not the girl they were aimed at. He stayed quiet not because he was a coward, but because speaking would mean telling Meredith the truth about herself. And he'd made a decision, maybe before Meredith could walk, that she was his daughter regardless of what any test would say. He sacrificed my comfort to protect her identity. For 35 years, I understood it. I even respected it. In the abstract, the way you respect a surgeon's decision that saved the patient but left a scar. But understanding didn't stop it from hurting, because the scar was mine. 14 Thanksgivings of being the wrong answer, and he let it happen because correcting it would have destroyed someone he chose to love. So he did it to me instead. I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes. I know because 2 shifts changed around me, the day nurses walking out, the night nurses walking in, and me in between, belonging to neither. Then I folded the report, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in my bag. I could have filed it away, could have kept counting, could have shown up at Dad's 70th with a casserole and a smile, and let Meredith give her toast and laughed along with the rest of them. But I was done being the wrong answer to a question nobody had the courage to ask. The party was in 2 weeks. I didn't choose the party for spectacle. I chose it because I knew how my family operated. Confront Mom alone, she'd redirect. Not today, Ellie. Confront Meredith privately, she'd call me jealous, unstable, desperate. Within a month, the story would be rewritten, and I'd be the crazy sister who fabricated a DNA test. I'd seen this playbook run for 18 years. I knew every page. Truth only survives when someone else is in the room to hear it. So I carried the envelope. 2 weeks. Through 3 12-hour shifts, 2 Sunday dinners, 1 group chat argument about whether the cake should be chocolate or vanilla, through a phone call from Meredith asking if I could pick up extra napkins for the party, since you're already out. I picked up the napkins. I also brought the envelope. Some results you file in a chart. Some you deliver in person. Let me take you back to the moment. Meredith is standing at the head table. The mic is still in her left hand, hanging at her side like she forgot it was there. The envelope is in her right. The page is unfolded, and her eyes are moving across the same line for the 4th time. The way a patient reads a diagnosis they weren't expecting, not because the words are complicated, but because the brain refuses to file them. Subject A, Meredith Brennan Cole. No parental match with Subject C, Frank Brennan. Subject B, Elise Brennan. Parental match confirmed, 99.98%. The room hadn't figured it out yet. Most people couldn't see the page from where they sat. They just saw Meredith's face change, the performance dropping off like a mask sliding sideways. And they saw me, standing 3 feet from the head table, hands at my sides, waiting. Meredith laughed first. Reflexive, defensive, the way you laugh when your brain hasn't caught up to your eyes. This is fake. She held up the page like evidence at a trial she was losing. You faked this. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The page had the lab's letterhead, the case numbers, the methodology. It wasn't a printout from a website. It was a certified paternity report from a CLIA-accredited laboratory. And Meredith, despite everything, was smart enough to know the difference. The room was starting to tune in. Not everyone, some people were still eating cake, still mid-conversation, but the tables nearest the front had gone quiet. Not movie quiet. Real-life quiet. The kind where forks slow down and people stop chewing and eyes move without heads turning. Meredith turned to Mom. Mom. Her voice cracked on the single syllable. Not sad yet. Scared. Tell her this is ridiculous. Tell her. Diane Brennan was sitting 2 seats to the right of Dad. She was holding her napkin in both hands, thumbs pressing into the fabric like she was trying to anchor herself to the table. She did not look up. She did not look at Meredith. She did not say this is ridiculous, or let's not do this here, or any of the 1,000 redirections she'd perfected over 30 years. She said nothing, and her silence was louder than anything Meredith had ever said into a microphone. Someone at the 3rd table, I think it was Dad's cousin Peggy, whispered something to her husband. A head turned. Then another. I watched the room do what rooms do when information leaks. The realization moved like water through a crack, slow at first, then faster, spreading table by table until the whole hall was damp with it. Someone looked at Ray Callahan. Ray was sitting at a table near the back, which was unusual for him. Ray Callahan was always front row, always first to toast, always the loudest laugh in Frank Brennan's orbit. But tonight he was 3 tables back with a beer he hadn't touched in 20 minutes. His face was the color of the tablecloth. I watched 2 women at the middle table look from Meredith to Ray and back again. I knew what they were seeing because I'd seen it 2 weeks ago at Sunday dinner. The dimple, the head tilt, the left side smile. Things you never notice until someone tells you to look, and then you can't unsee them. Dad didn't stand up. That was the detail that stayed with me longest. Frank Brennan, who stood on sidelines for 26 years, who paced and pointed and shouted plays through rain and cold, and 3 losing seasons in a row sat in his chair at his 70th birthday party and didn't move. He looked at Meredith, not at Mom, not at Ray, not at me, at Meredith, the daughter he chose. His eyes weren't angry. They were tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one night or 1 year, but from carrying something so long. Your body has shaped itself around the weight. He looked like a man who'd been holding his breath since 1991, and someone had finally opened the window. I spoke. 3 sentences. I'd rehearsed more, but 3 was enough. I ran the test 3 times. The results are consistent. I looked at Meredith. You spent 18 years calling me another man's mistake. Pause. The kind I'd learned from Dad, the coaching pause, the one that lets the play develop before you call the next one. You were talking about yourself. Meredith stared at me, then at Dad. And for 1 fraction of a second, shorter than a heartbeat, longer than I expected, something moved across her face that wasn't anger or denial. It was recognition. She was looking at the man who'd driven to every recital, paid for every semester, walked her down the aisle, and she was understanding for the first time that he did all of it knowing she wasn't his, choosing her anyway, and she'd spent 18 years repaying him by trying to exile the one child who was. The moment passed. It always does with Meredith. She turned to Mom. You knew? Her voice split open, high and jagged. You let me say those things for years, you let me. And Mom, finally, opened her mouth. Not to confess, not to apologize. She said, Meredith, please. Not here. Not here. The exact words she'd said to me 100 times. The same redirect, the same door closing on the same truth. But this time Meredith was on the other side of it, and she heard what I'd been hearing my whole life. Shut up and protect the lie. Meredith screamed at our mother for 9 minutes. I know because I counted. Old habits. The party emptied the way a waiting room empties after bad news, quickly, quietly, nobody making eye contact on the way out. Ray Callahan was the first to leave. He didn't say goodbye to Dad, didn't clap him on the shoulder or promise to call, just stood up, left his untouched beer on the table, and walked out through the side door like a man who'd been rehearsing that exit for 35 years. Gerald Whitmore was the last. He found me near the coat rack, squeezed my hand the way he had at the beginning of the night, and said something I didn't understand yet. He always knew you were his, Ellie. That's why he kept every card. I nodded, filed it away, didn't process it. Too much data, not enough bandwidth. The days after the party came in waves. Meredith called 11 times on Sunday. I didn't answer. She left texts that read like stages of grief compressed into a group chat. You ruined Dad's birthday. This doesn't change anything between us. Those home DNA kits aren't even accurate, you know that. And then, at 2:14 a.m., why would you do this to me? To me. Even now, even with the results on the table, with Mom's silence still ringing, with 50 witnesses who watched her world crack open even now, Meredith was the victim. I typed a reply I didn't send. I didn't do anything to you, Meredith. I just stopped letting you do it to me. Then I deleted it. Some results speak for themselves. Mom called once, Tuesday afternoon. Her voice was composed, rehearsed, the way she sounded when she chaired church committee meetings. You could have come to me first. We could have handled this privately. You had 30 years to handle it privately, Mom. You chose to let me carry it instead. Silence. Then, you don't understand the position I was in. I understand exactly the position you were in. You had 2 daughters and you chose to sacrifice one to protect the other. I paused. You just picked the wrong one to sacrifice. She hung up. First time in my life my mother ended a call before I did. And Dad. Dad didn't call. 3 days. No, eyes up, kid. No text. No voicemail. Just silence, the same silence I'd grown up inside, except now it had a different shape. Before, his silence was a wall he hid behind. Now it felt like a room he was sitting in alone, processing 35 years of weight that had just been dropped on a VFW hall floor in front of everyone he knew. I told myself he needed time, but at 3 a.m., on Wednesday, sitting in my car after a double shift, parking lot empty, coffee cold in the cup holder, I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. Did I do this to set the truth free? Or did I do it to hurt Meredith? Honest answer, both. And if both, then I wasn't noble. I was just tactical, better aim, same weapon. The thought sat in my stomach like a stone I couldn't pass. Then, Thursday morning, my phone buzzed. Not eyes up, kid. 4 words I'd never seen from my father in 32 years of texts. Garage, Saturday, bring coffee. The shortest message he'd ever sent me. Also the most he'd ever asked for. In 32 years, I had always come to him on my own every visit, every holiday, every Sunday dinner. He never once asked me to come. This was the first time he asked, and that changed everything. Saturday morning. I pulled into the driveway at 8:15 with 2 cups of coffee from the gas station on Route 1, not Starbucks, not the good place downtown. The gas station, because that's what Dad drank for 26 years of 5 a.m. practices. And if we were going to do this, we were going to do it in his language. I didn't go inside the house. Walked straight to the garage. The side door was already open. Dad was sitting on the folding chair he'd had since I was in middle school, green canvas, one armrest duct-taped. His workbench was behind him, cluttered with the same tools that had been cluttered there my whole life. The garage smelled like motor oil and sawdust and the kind of cold concrete that never fully warms up, even in Virginia in September. He pointed to the other chair. "Sit." I sat, handed him the coffee. He took a sip, nodded once the coaching nod, the one that meant acceptable. Keep going, and we sat in silence for what felt like a long time but was probably 2 minutes. Frank Brennan did not do preamble. "I suspected when she was about 3, he said, looking at the workbench, not at me. She started looking like Ray. Same mouth, same way of turning her head when she laughed. He took another sip. "I never tested. Didn't need to. Why didn't you leave?" He looked at me like I'd asked why the sky was up. "Because she was already my kid. You don't undo that." Simple. No philosophy, no speech. A coach stating a rule so fundamental it didn't require explanation. "I should have stopped her," he said. "Quieter now, Meredith. Every time she said that to you, every time she—" He stopped. Not because he ran out of words, because if he said the next one, the one after it would crack him open, and Frank Brennan did not crack in front of his players or his daughters. I thought if I stopped her, she'd ask why. And if she asked why, I'd have to tell her. And I couldn't. He exhaled. I couldn't do that to her. "So you did it to me instead." He looked down at his coffee. "Yeah." Long pause. "I did. And I'm sorry I did." No qualifier. No, but you have to understand. Just the apology, clean and bare, the way he probably gave them to referees after a bad call, short, direct, and meaning every word. We sat with that for a while. The garage door was open, and the morning was coming in gray and cool and unhurried. Then Dad stood up. Walked to the far corner where the shelving unit held paint cans and old trophies from seasons nobody remembered. He reached behind a stack of boxes and pulled out a shoebox. Nike. Men's size 11. Faded. He brought it back, set it on the workbench between us, and opened the lid. Birthday cards. 32 of them. Every card I had ever given him, from age 1 to 32. The early ones in crayon on construction paper, edges curling. The middle ones in marker on folded notebook paper. The later ones store-bought from CVS, with my handwriting getting smaller and neater each year. He'd kept every single one. Filed chronologically, the way I filed specimens ordered, preserved, evidence of something that mattered. I picked up the first one. A 5-year-old's handwriting, thick purple crayon. "Happy birthday, Daddy." Misspelled. Perfect. I couldn't say it out loud, Dad said, so I kept these instead. I held the card for a long time. Then I put it back in the box, closed the lid, and slid it toward him. "Keep them safe for me?" He nodded. "Always have." We finished our coffee. We didn't talk about Mom. We didn't talk about Meredith. We didn't talk about Ray or the party or what happens next. Some conversations are about what you don't say. Dad taught me that, though not the way he intended. I drove home with the windows down and the seat warm from September sun. I did not count anything on the drive back. Not the miles, not the minutes, not the stoplights. For the first time in 18 years, I had nothing left to count. Some test results confirm what you already suspected. Some reveal what you never imagined. But the one that changed my life wasn't on the report. It was in a shoebox, in a garage, written in handwriting I didn't remember, but my father never forgot.
Quỷ à? Không phải rồi. Đi vệ sinh đi nào.